everybody. Welcome to the Autumn TUM.ai Makeathon 2022. Welcome to the Deep Dive Days. I'm very happy to have today with me Jasmine Al-Douri as our first speaker, who is talking about responsible AI, also at Microsoft. And then at 7:30, we will have a second talk also about the topic of AI with Philipp Schaller, and he's from the company IBM. So how is today's two talks each structured? We will start with a short introduction about Jasmine, then we will go to the talk, and Jasmine will explain us a bit more what actually responsible AI is, and then we will go into a Q&A session. And for that, I would like to ask you to join us in that discussion. Please have a look at our channel for the Makeathon in autumn and channel number 2 in the Slack channel. And there you can ask all the questions that you have, and I will read them with you, and then I will ask them to Jasmine directly. So now let's have a look who is actually our speaker for today. Jasmine is a business program manager at Microsoft. She has a background in political science and psychology as her bachelor's in Heidelberg. She also did an exchange semester in Michigan, and then she came to us, to TUM, and studied politics and technology for her master's, especially about the regulation of emerging technologies and AI ethics. She did a lot of research while her time as a professional. She was working at the Heidelberg Institute for International Conflict Research, what a name, and was especially doing research about conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa. Then she joined the entrepreneurship tech quartier in Frankfurt. So she brings that side also to the table. And then she was working for AI for Earth observation in the field of reasoning and uncertainties, and then also was researching about this ethical part. And now she joined Microsoft, and this is why we are very happy to have you here, because she is not just working and researching and studying, but she's also volunteering a lot. And I'm very happy to tell a bit about that as well. She's the award winner of the Volunteer Award for Diverse Young Leaders, and also with a friend of mine, which I met at the Munich Urban Collab, Amela, the founder of the Responsible Technology Hub, which is an initiative for interdisciplinary collaboration of young people. So I'm not sure if I still count like that, but yeah, for young people to co-create a responsible technological future. And therefore, I would give the microphone to you, Jasmine, with the question, why is it important to have responsible AI?
Sebastian, I really needed to get myself together not to blush. I did actually do a lot of research, that is true. That's actually how I ended up at Microsoft, because research is just part of the love that I have, the passion that I have, and that's how I ended up being at Microsoft. But let's have a talk about responsible AI, and I actually prepared a presentation for you guys because I thought this might be more interesting for you, especially because we're gonna have a deep dive into AI, most specifically how Microsoft is working with responsible AI. So,
we see perfectly.
Perfect. So today I will be talking in regards of how Microsoft is working with AI, but most importantly, the responsibility aspect. So
Jasmine at the moment. So it wasn't my connection. Nevertheless, I think let's see if we can get her back into the stream. That's really unfortunate, but that happens. I have to apologize on behalf of our team, but I'm sure Jasmine will come back to our call. Yeah, I think we have somebody in the waiting area at the moment, and Jasmine is coming back. Okay. I would say we maybe do like a 3 minutes break until you figure out if your laptop is working. And then we will resume with the talk at roughly 6, yeah, let's say 6:45. Apologies. thank you very much for waiting for this small technical issues, but now we are ready, and so therefore I hand over to you, Jasmine.
So with this small inconvenience of technology today, I thought we were in the 21st century, but apparently we're still having issues with our laptops. So let's have a deep dive into what responsibility actually in AI is. So for those of you who do work on AI, meaning like who are actually software engineers or engineers generally who work with AI, some of you will know that there's a current heated debate on our responsibility on how to use AI. So there are different debates that I will actually dive into, but these are just general an overview or examples of how AI is being used. Can be used in a military context or in the context of surveillance, as you can see in the first two pictures. So basically, law enforcement's using AI for surveillance purposes. But it can be also misused, which we will see in the next slide. I have actually prepared a video for you, which actually shows a deep fake of Barack Obama. And let me just play and so you see it.
I think we cannot hear the audio, Jasmine, to be honest. I think you have to enable that.
Okay. So basically, what the video shows is a deep fake of Barack Obama, who's holding a speech. And in this speech, he's basically making regards or remarks that are actually not that typical of President Obama to do. And this was actually a video made by the production firm of BuzzFeed, where they used Jordan Peele as somebody who they put the deepfake over his face, and he made those remarks. Why am I even talking about this? This video is about 6 or 7 years old. Back then, nobody really thought AI or facial recognition or deepfakes will be used for military purposes. So with the purpose to actually misuse it. There was always the idea of somebody could use it to declare war, but nobody really thought it would happen. This year, it actually happened with President Zelensky during the Ukraine war, where in the beginning of the conflict, we actually saw a deepfake go through the internet, with many people being very shocked, but also not knowing whether it was a deepfake or not. So it took actually the government of Ukraine to openly acknowledge the fact that this was a deepfake created by somebody to disrupt the conflict. So we see it's already used for military purposes, and this is obviously bringing us to a point where we have to ask ourselves, how are we using AI, and where can we use it, and where should we prohibit it? But obviously, AI can also serve as a tool. So in this case, and I brought you this case also, the AI was used as a tool to help judges make a decision. In this case specifically, an AI was used to calculate the probability of people recommitting another crime after their initial one. And obviously now one might ask, okay, why do we even need an AI to do that? And the answer is simple. Judges are mostly overwhelmed with the amount of charges they have to analyze. And obviously an AI can be a great tool to help them figure out whether to put out people on bail or not. The problem here in this specific case was that the AI was not calculating in a fair way or was not making predictions in a fair way. Most importantly, it was actually very much biased towards minorities, mainly in the US, Black Americans. So African Americans were seeing high chances of being labeled as high risk rather than low risk, even if their felonies were less of a charge than those of others. We see this really well with the Brisha Borden case, where she had just juvenile misdemeanors, but no major misdemeanor, while Vernon Porter actually had 2 armed robberies and attempted armed robbery. So offenses that are high end. The AI basically rated Brisha as high risk, while it rated Vernon as low risk, which shows that there was an immediate bias in the algorithm. If we were all together in one place, I would ask you how this is even possible. I would just like to ask this question, and maybe you guys can think about this at home. How is it possible that an AI can be this biased, and what are the basis for such predictions? But furthermore, another risk, and we're talking about biases here as well, is generally if there's bias in the data or the general model. So simply put, if the data that we use for training in AI is in itself very homogeneous, the model will become a bad one, especially if instances in predictions in diverse societies or groups. So these kind of biases within the data set are already resulting in biased outcomes of models. So I actually brought you another example here, which is a very prominent example, actually. If you use Bing or Google, and you search the term CEO, you will mostly see a very biased kind of picturescape. Mostly it's white middle-aged men who you will see. This has actually become better. We improved in this, but this has still been an issue. And you can even see this in, translation AI that we use. I'm not sure if you can see it here now, probably not, but it's just a video of using Bing translation and showing how it actually translates specific words gender-based. So if we say he is a nurse and she is a doctor, it will translate it to he is a doctor and she is a nurse. So very gender conform. This is an issue because obviously for translation, we need to know exactly what a person says.
But we can actually see it.
We can see it, nice. So you saw it there. It's a German-Turkish translation, but it basically shows you that there's a bias, a gender bias already within the AI. Now we actually come to my favorite topic, which is facial recognition. Obviously, AI can also be used for facial recognition, but one of the most amazing documentaries I've actually watched was Coded Bias by Joy Buolamwini, who was actually one of the researchers who actually found out that many facial recognition systems are very, very much biased, and they're biased against minorities. So these systems were able to accurately recognize faces of white men, but mostly struggle to recognize faces of Black people, of Asian people, and specifically the of Asian people. It's kind of, yeah, in some kind of way really bad to even see how some systems even replied. So here the system actually replied with, the photo we want to upload does not meet our criteria because it says that the eyes are closed. So the problem here is that the AI wasn't trained on other faces than the Western norm. And this is an issue because if we use these kind of systems specifically in the public places or for security purposes, and they can't recognize specific faces or can't recognize faces of minorities, these systems are not reliable at all, nor are they safe to be used. So this brings me to the actual part of our positioning. So artificial intelligence obviously challenges us, but it challenges us in a way that we have to rethink and determine the positions that we are taking, specifically on ethics and values. And because this debate is heating and is becoming more prominent and more important than ever, Microsoft was actually very adamant in positioning itself. And in this case, it actually brought out principles. One of the first corporations to actually do that openly and to say, hey, we actually want to bring out AI that is responsible. And if we're saying it's responsible, we have to have a set of norms and principles that we set for ourselves as a base for our products. And this is what Microsoft did. And we have actually just recently shared our impact assessments that I will talk about later as well with the public, with the general public. So people can actually use this as well for their own AI systems. So we can ensure that AI is in some kind of way responsible. But to give you a deep dive, because I actually really want to give you a deep dive in this area, I would like to start with the accountability part and the transparency part of our principles. So these two principles are somewhat the basis for the others, because without transparency and accountability, the other four principles are not really achievable in some kind of way. And based on that, you will see that our first one, fairness in this case, is basically concerned on the fact that systems should be fair. What does that exactly mean? It means that people with the same situational conditions should get the same recommendations. So let's say an AI is used to give loans, or an AI is used to suggest medical treatments. Then people with the same symptoms or people with the same financial circumstances should get the same recommendations. So stuff like, or points like gender or origin should not play a role when these recommendations are made, because that is not a factor that should influence the decision in the first place. Then the second principle that we have is reliability and safety. And this kind of very intuitive way of saying the system must simply work well, especially if it has a relevance to our mental or physical safety. That also means that AI systems should not only be safe under lab conditions, which obviously is a super clean environment, and lab conditions are generally not as perfect of a prediction for what's going to happen in the real world, but it should be in some kind of way working well in an unexpected environment, such as, and this is the case for the Deutsche Bahn Blindenhund, the guiding dog that Microsoft actually worked with the Deutsche Bahn with. So basically, the DB guiding dog is nothing else than an AI that assists people who are blind, specifically in the train stations. And it gives them the ability to be independent from actual dogs or actual people. The third part, which is privacy and IT security, for those who have worked with data, you know for a fact that how important privacy and IT security is. For us, it's really important that the AI systems are complying with applicable privacy laws that we have. So in Europe, this would be the GDPR. Most specifically in Germany, that would be DGSVO. And these privacy laws usually include, in some kind of way, transparency or accountability. And specifically transparency on how data is collected, how it's used, and most importantly, how it's stored. And the last of the four principles that we see on top is inclusiveness. And what exactly do we mean by that? It basically means that we have 1 billion people in the world who have disabilities. And for them, AI is a completely total game changer. It is obviously now that we will be even more in the future to actually include AI and to make people more independent. So we have already things like speech-to-text transcriptions or visual recognition services that help those who can't necessarily see, as the Deutsche Bahn guiding dog, or technology where people who can't hear have some kind of limitations are assisted. So we have an inclusive design guidelines that basically help developers to discover those potential barriers in the product itself and in the product development. But most importantly, it helps them to see who they might be excluding, specifically people with disabilities, so they can fix them before they're even bringing them to the market. And when we do that, we sort of work out experiences that are beneficial to everyone, but also include everyone. And just to dive deeper into transparency and accountability. So with transparency, we mostly mean that all stakeholders, so not just the developers, need to understand what does the system do, how does the system work, and most importantly, what is the system not doing. Otherwise, we obviously have the problem where people use an AI model and they don't even know the scope of this model, and they don't necessarily understand the restrictions of the models. So they might be using the AI way too broadly, even though it wasn't even designed for the purpose. So we have 4 cognitive services that are so-called transparency notes that explain for each other these cognitive services. So they basically explain what they can do and what they can't do, what the limitations are, and where you really, really have to pay attention. And by all of us understanding how these systems work, we have a better awareness of upcoming errors, or we can quickly actually recognize when these biases are coming up and if there are performance issues. And the last one, obviously, accountability. This is the principle that is also relatively straightforward. Basically means we need to define who's responsible and who's liable if something goes wrong. So for us at Microsoft, it's really important that all these principles apply to everything. And with everything, I mean every product, and to everyone. That means not only the developers, but every person who is included to the product development in some kind of way. So I actually brought this kind of picture into this presentation, into this workshop, because I think it's really important to show you the stages of implementation of these principles. When I first started, I was like, okay, great, we have these principles, but when exactly are we using them? And it's really important to tell you that all of these principles are basically revisited with every part of the product development. So when we start with the envisioning of a product, into the defining and the prototyping, all these principles are revisited in every stage. So, and I actually brought an example for you so we could go through this in case you actually want to use this kind of framework for your AI if you're building some this week. Let's say we're building an AI that is supposed to help with translating languages from one language to another. The question here would be, what should we keep in mind when we're building this AI? And I want you guys at home or wherever you are to sit down and really think about this and to do this kind of with me. It's kind of an exercise for you as well. Obviously, we're not in the same room, so we can't necessarily do this together, but I want you to do this because I think it's a really nice training for you to understand how exactly these principles are put into action. Okay, our product is an AI system that translates languages for customers in real time. Keep this in mind. Okay, this is the first part of the envisioning. The first thing we would do is we would ask ourselves, what potential risk could such system actually have? So we'll think about the principles that we had, right? Let's start with reliability and safety. The first question we should ask ourselves is, how well does the translation of languages go? Is it going very well or is it going very bad? So keep in mind, where is our data coming from if we're doing this translation or if we're trying to train this AI to do the translation? If we're using data, for example, websites in the internet, we will quickly realize that most websites in the internet are English or Spanish. So we need to keep in mind what kind of languages we're actually going to include and which languages are not so common. So keep in mind reliability and safety. How reliable is our system? How well does it actually translate? And how are these systems actually used? And safety is another part that obviously is also important. But in this specific AI system, a safety component is not as much given as, for example, if you use an AI system for surveillance purposes. The second principle is privacy and security. the first question we should ask ourselves is, which privacy concerns could there be? First idea, okay, we're actually using spoken word when we're using the training of the translation. So we're saying somebody's actually recording somebody else while talking. So we have a speech to text kind of function in there as well. But then the question is also, okay, if the spoken word is recorded, where is it stored and how is it then used? So you see the ideas that you have, and you will most probably have these issues as well during this week. The ideas that you have will show you different issues and different problems at different times. So if you're at the developing stage and you're trying to ask yourself, okay, what kind of tools do I want to include? You always have to keep those principles always in mind. This brings me to transparency. Does everyone in your team understand how the system operates and what it's not supposed to do? So let's say you have a tool in your AI that has a speech to text tool in there. The issue here is, what do we do with the actual recorded part of the speech to text function? Is it stored somewhere else? And if this is the case specifically with privacy, now the transparency part comes in. Do you actually let the users know that your data is being recorded and stored somewhere else? And then obviously, for your own transparency purposes, you need to ask yourself, are you using that system for something else as well? So the other question that you might ask yourself here is, does it translate languages, but maybe does it even create language? So keep this in mind whenever you, ideate on possible systems. In accountability here, the question is, who's responsible if the system malfunctions? If the system is used in a broader spectrum where people have a lot of responsibility, who's accountable if there's a maltranslation or there's a translation that was so bad that some kind of issue actually erupted or misunderstanding erupted and this caused a huge fight? Let's say that for purposes. So who's responsible? This needs to be defined, clearly defined. Obviously, with inclusiveness, the first question that comes to mind is, which languages are left out and which are included? Also, which is very important, which kind of language are you using? Are you using everyday lingo, slang? Are these kind of languages included or not? Also, how are people who might be from minorities who speak in a completely different way in everyday lingo and slang, how is their speech translated? Also, the question here again, how are people with disabilities included? Are all voices recognized, for example? So these kind of things have to be kept in mind. With fairness, obviously, the question is your technology or is your AI system accessible for everyone? This is just the envisioning part. Let's go over to the next part and let's define. So with the definition part of implementing our principles, obviously, the one thing that you want to do is define a goal. That means, what goal do you want to achieve with the system and what is required to build the system? This brings you then to, obviously, at some point, prototyping your idea. And here the question holds, are the AI principles still holding up in the prototype? So if you're building it and you're testing the data and the models and the processes, are all these 6 principles still applicable? If not, we're going back and we have to redo the prototyping in order to understand that we're trying to include those principles and make sure that they are not only included, but they're actually implemented. The reason why I'm going so deep into it is because we saw this earlier. We saw this example earlier where translation didn't go well. And this is an example of what should not happen during the launching of a product. We actually want to minimize issues like this and actually make sure that by the time we're launching a product, it's actually checking all of the principles that we put down. And then the last part of product development, obviously you're building it, you're launching it, and you're evolving it. When you're then, after prototyping, you're actually building the system. Again, during the building of the system, you need to keep in mind these principles are there. We need to check them off. So the question here is, are we building the product based on the AI principles, or are we just ignoring them? With the launch, and this is one of the parts that I really like because this is where I come into play, the question of, does the product actually meet all standards before the launch? That means here specifically, we need to test its compliance to the principles that we have. If we see that the technology is not necessarily compliant to our principles, we will send it back to the building team. And we will say, okay, this needs to be rebuilt in some kind of way. And once it's launched, obviously you want to optimize your product. You want to continuously evolve it and make sure that in the future there are no problems or sensitive cases that are pushed with it. Which brings me to the sensitive uses. So AI obviously is not only a tool, but can also be used in sensitive cases or in sensitive uses. And here it means, like, what we define with it is basically the situation where it's a little bit more tricky when we have a sensitive use at hand. And these can represent different situations. And we defined actually three specific categories for this. First is the denying consequential services, meaning if the system has an impact on your life, opportunities, or your legal positions. This is a sensitive use case. For example, when an AI determines how many loans people get, we see this as a sensitive use case because it has an impact on when someone gets more money than someone else. Or for example, if medical treatments are given, you have the possibility that people don't get the right treatments. Another example is law enforcement, which was also seen on the first slides, actually. And we say, yeah, the darker complexed person has a higher risk. And we saw that actually higher risk of being labeled more risk of recommitting a crime. So we see this as a high sensitive use case. That's where the AI system also has an impact on what consequences the person has to fear legally.
Like, we're slowly approaching the Q&A session. Maybe you have like some last points in the slide that you want to discuss. I'm not sure what the current state of the presentation is, but yeah.
We're actually almost over. I was going to skip anyways, like a couple of slides, but I just wanted to deep dive like in the principles, because I mean, obviously you see the sensitive cases. I explained to you what it is, but obviously we have, as I said, two other categories that basically focus on risk of physical or psychological harm and the threat to human rights. This is just the base of what comes after. But obviously we also have practices where we actually practice what we preach. And we have different guidelines that we offer our developers. You can actually see them here very well: the human AI guidelines, conversational AI guidelines, inclusive designs, fairness, and data sheets for data sets. So basically giving our developers a hands-on guide on how they can develop their AI while staying on the principles that we've committed to. And you can see here the guidelines are pretty interesting. They cover so many areas, most specifically 18. And we're doing this mostly because we want to make sure that if something goes wrong, our developers are not necessarily sitting there and thinking, oh, I did everything wrong, but it's a way for us to actually learn from it and to actually add on to the knowledge that we already have. And what I actually really liked is the idea of seeing the principles, the practices, and the tools. So in order to make sure that AI is responsible, we also use tools for that and offer actually tools outside as well. For this specifically, we have three main points that we basically focus on, which is understanding the AI, protecting the AI, and controlling it. This was actually, these upcoming slides were some that I actually wanted to skip, because I think if you ever have questions on it, you can just contact us and we will find a way to show you this. But we basically offer different tools that help you control, secure, and actually understand the AI that you're building. Earlier, I actually mentioned them. We're doing impact assessments. It's nothing else than us looking through the AI systems that we're building and that we're launching and seeing whether they're compliant with the principles that we set or not. We're now doing this with every AI system that we're bringing out. And in this case, obviously, you can find the impact assessments that we're doing online on Microsoft. They're openly available, and you can use them with a guide for your AI systems. In case you're building one this week, or you're planning on building one this week, use that as a way to make sure that your AI is responsible and that it meets the criteria to be responsible. And because this is more in the organizational part of what Microsoft does is specifically with responsible AI, I will skip this as well. But one of the main things that I wanted you guys to take away with is that obviously this is a lot. At the end of the day, responsible AI is so much more than just building something and calling it responsible. It's the legitimate responsibility of developers, of people who are helping in the design, of people who are in the marketing team. It's everyone's responsibility to make sure that that AI is in some kind of way safe and inclusive, and it's used in a way that it's for the common good. So here as well, we have to ask ourselves, how must our products be designed? And how are we making sure that it's designed in a responsible way? And this was a lot, and I know that, but what I want you to take away from this is that if you continue on in the road of building your product, it is important you keep these points in mind and make sure that the impact of your product isn't jeopardizing someone's life in any way. But to build something responsibly also means that we need to be extra careful and make sure that there's extra time to look at our values and look whether our product is aligned with our values and solutions. And at the end of the day, I would even argue that we owe this time, this extra time and extra pressure and extra passion that we put in. We owe this to not only the consumers, but obviously to ourselves and to future generations. So this week is going to be a lot. You have a whole Makeathon on. You will get to talk to so many people. You will have probably nights where you're sitting and you're going to contemplate on your product or whatever solution you're going to work on a problem. But keep in mind that this is only the first step. There's so many more steps ahead. And whenever you're working on this and you're actually building something, keep in mind that you're also responsible for this. And that it's in our responsibility to make sure that whatever we put out there is doing good and is not doing harm to us. So more than welcome to get some questions in now.
Thank you very, very much, Jasmine, for this great talk. I think something that I personally get out of it, it's like ethics and responsible AI is like a part that we have to integrate in our development process. This is not something that at the end of the day, like somebody does in a compliance department, or I will have a look at the end and like it's done, but actually like we have to integrate it completely. One question that I personally ask myself is, well, we all have different values, right? So maybe somebody from a different country has different values or norms also, for example, concerning inclusiveness of like certain minorities or majorities of a society. So when I'm developing a product, where or how do I decide to include this or that, like to my norms, or to whom's norms do I act out? Yeah, adhere to, exactly.
It's actually a really big debate within the AI ethics bubble or research field. One of the main reasons is that currently AI ethics is very much Western normed and Western oriented. So meaning in the debate of how should AI ethics norms look like or principles look like, it's mostly Western countries who are setting the principles. So this obviously is an issue, and a lot of organizations are working on it to change that and to include, for example, the global South. But, and this is the one thing that Microsoft is doing, when these principles were set, and this is actually part of the guideline as well, it is tremendously important for the developers and the team who are actually developing the AI system to talk to local stakeholders and to the civil society. So if I build a system in Asia, for example, it's super important. Let's say I'm building it in Singapore, which is a super diverse country. I will have to talk to stakeholders there and see, okay, who are the minorities who need to be included? I will talk to the civil society and talk to them and see where are the issues within where the cleavages, that's the better word, where the cleavages within the society, and basically make sure these cleavages are represented in the data set as well. So one of the major things that we have to keep in mind as developers is the fact that, as you said, culture norms are different from country to country, from continent to continent. But these norms actually, or these cultural differences, have to be kept in mind.
Another question that we raised in our TUM.ai community was like in the translation scenario that you came up with, like many languages contain an ingrained bias. So, for example, like cat is die Katze and dog is der Hund. Like in many other languages, also like similar. Like is there even like a gender with certain things? Like how can you cover all these languages all together? And where do you say, okay, like now it makes sense, absolutely, but where do we have the bias? So, for example, with der Pfleger and die Pflegerin.
That's actually a really good question. I think one of the aspects is that, and this is, as far as I know, this is an issue that linguistics people can actually answer way better than I do, because they're actually the ones who are working with the developers on this issue. I think a better question would be to ask, how can we represent the change of language in AI systems? So obviously languages change with time. For example, in Germany, we have German slang that I also personally in my free time like to use. Obviously, these systems don't necessarily understand it if they weren't trained on it. But also, we're becoming more, we're trying to become more gender neutral. So how are we going to actually teach an AI system or train an AI system to be gender neutral when in fact we're still debating on how language is changing? And I think this is a better question, or the better first way to answer your question, if that makes sense. But at the same time, the biases that you inherently have in languages are man-made, if you can say it like that. So the question here is an AI system even able to deal with that bias if human in itself can't have an answer for that, if that makes sense? Because at the end of the day, AI systems are just representing us and representing our societies in some kind of way. So if a society doesn't have an answer to that yet, how can an AI system be built in a way that is unbiased in languages when languages in itself are inherently biased? I hope this made sense. It made sense in my head.
But like a question back, like how would you do it as a team when you say, okay, like we want to have like a AI without any bias? So what? How can I become aware of my own biases that I have in the team without, like how do I do that?
I think one first really good step would be to sit down with experts in linguistics. That would be the first step.
Not just for the language part, maybe also, I don't know, like I was raised in a certain way and suddenly like, no, like I have a bias sometimes sometimes I catch myself, right? Like thinking thoughts that I think, okay, well, this is quite racist. Well, I shouldn't do that. Like,
oh, you mean okay, you
like,
mean the
like
okay.
I realize myself, okay, like this is a bias that I have. Maybe I have to actively suppress it. So how do I come to that stage as a team when I'm maybe not aware, because it's not like nobody ever told me basically to my face, well, Sebastian, this is like racist, or like this is not okay, like this is not this is not ethical. So how do I come to that stage by myself?
Okay, now I get your question in what way you mean it's not in the languages in itself. First of all, you have to make sure that your team is diverse. So if your team in itself is very much, and I'm going to be very blunt here, very much male and white, you will have a certain representation there in itself. But if you have a team with somebody like me who's coming from a non-academic background, who is used to a specific lingo, this person is more able to say, hey, we have actually trained the AI in such kind of way that it's very biased towards my lingo that I use on my everyday basis. So first step, you make sure that the team is diverse. Second step, again, you go to stakeholders. So in my personal view, probably go to organizations that specifically deal with cultural exchange, for example. Have a talk with them and see whether whatever we trained the AI on is actually representable, or it actually represents a country where this AI is specifically used for. And then at some point, and this is maybe the third solution for this, there are different models that you can use, AI models, and one of them is federated learning. I'm not sure if every one of you heard of this before, but it's a way to train AI systems while trying to keep the privacy of the data that is used as high as possible. So the AI is thereby able to learn from different locations, from different data sets, but at the same time, the data is in itself kept very private and is secure. So this way you're able to make sure that the AI can be trained from different locations of the world. So different languages in itself, but also different styles, language styles are included. So for example, in Germany, if we said we want to build a language system that is inherently unbiased, but we don't necessarily have the data to do that, we could say, okay, let's spread out in whole Germany and see if we can find different data sets from different locations. So we don't only have the different lingual styles in there, but we also have different dialects in there. So Bayerisch is, for example, Bavarian is very different from Kölsch, which is spoken in Cologne. And this way you can actually make sure that AI is in some kind of way unbiased. But it's a long step. That's the main thing that I wanted to bring up a point in the presentation. To get there, you have to take so many steps. You have to think about so many points when it comes to biases, that you sometimes it's very frustrating to get to that point. But the most important thing is that during the development stage, you will have to talk to so many different people. And at the end of the day, it just comes back to the aspect of surrounding your team around very, very diverse environments, but also making your team in itself very diverse. So you have always different people looking at this system from a different perspective and making sure that their kind of perspective is included. So it's in some kind of way representative as well.
And I think this is also a nice closing word and a good advice to our participants to create teams that are like most diverse as possible from different backgrounds, may it be from a religion or a cultural perspective, from a perspective of like I'm studying business, or I'm like more from the domain area, or I'm like more into tech. May it be men, women, or transgender. So it really depends, and therefore I want to thank you very, very much
Thank you for,
for your great talk.
Thank you.
Yasmin. We're looking forward what you're doing and which other volunteer awards you're gonna win.
We'll see.
But now we're going to our basically well-deserved break because we have another speaker. Unfortunately, like we had a short time lag in the beginning of our talk, so we will short the break to 10 minutes and we will resume at 7:40 again with our next speaker, Philipp Schaller from IBM, who is going to talk about AI for climate. See you then. Well, welcome back to the deep dive days on the 28th. I'm very happy to have our next guest with us, which is Philipp Schaller, which is an associate partner at IBM. Also, to give a short introduction, which I already gave previously to our first talk, but it's the same sequence that we're going to do. A short introduction about Philipp, then he will present the topic of AI for climate. We will do 15 minutes Q&A. Please make sure to join us in this Q&A. You can ask questions in our Slack channel for the Makeathon in channel 2. And then at the end, I will give a big or like a slide of the upcoming events. And I'm really looking forward to today's expert. Because this is Philipp Schaller. He studied business informatics in his bachelor at Hochschule Ingolstadt, which is north of Munich, and then followed his dreams and studied information systems and management at Hochschule Munich, where he also joined basically our ecosystem. He also has a lot of practical experience, for example, with the company Siemens. He did a SAP rollout for supply chain and also built up a knowledge base, something that is, I think, quite important when you want to keep knowledge in a company or a team. You might also consider that, or especially us at TUM.ai, we also have a knowledge base and quite helpful sometimes. Then he went to consulting, and in 2016 he joined IBM, especially in the area of the Internet of Things and digital transformation. And today he's working on the transformation towards a sustainability. And therefore, I'm very happy to have you here, Philipp, with us. And therefore, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian. Good evening, everyone. Very nice introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, you can see my slides. So I'm Philipp. I'm very happy to be with you here tonight, and eager to see what comes out of your hybrid Makeathon weekend. Very great experience. So what I'm doing at IBM, I'm leading a business unit, a practice where we focus on sustainability as a business topic, as a technology topic. And we call this sustainability transformation. You have a lot of consulting in the market. We are more on the transformation part, so making ideas and client requirements, making them happen, turning them into solution. That's what we basically do. We are around 40 people located here in Munich. Not all of us sit, like our center of the team is here in Munich. And we're working with clients all over the DACH region and closely connected in IBM to our European and global teams. So there are also a lot of things going on. And I brought you a couple of examples tonight to get you inspired, hopefully, of AI, because you cannot normally separate technology topics from AI nowadays. So everything we do has somehow to do with data and to make sense of data, to make kind of automation and to create an impact with that. And saying this, I put together some information for you combining sustainability and AI and how we do, or how do we to make an impact with that technologies. First of all, just a couple of slides for setting the scene. When we talk about sustainability, we basically understand the complete set of the UN Sustainability Development Goals behind this term. So not only climate, well, climate is a major focus and many of our projects refer to climate, but it's also the other aspects in terms of social equality and well-beings. And we try to address basically all of these development goals. And even further, when we work with our clients, we work on making these companies or these organizations in the public sector into sustainable enterprises, sustainable organizations. And therefore, we see basically three dimensions. It's the people, it's planet, of course, but also it's the terms of profit. It may sound weird in this context, especially when we talk about protecting our climate, protecting our planet. But at the end of the day, our organization, our societies, our business economies are built on profits, built on making money, built on making business. And all the clients we work with need to have this consequence in their investment decisions. So this becomes, or this represents like a common pillar in the overall understanding of becoming a sustainable enterprise. As you can see, outer space here, all the sustainability development goals are able to align to these dimensions. And when we merge them together, that's when we say we really can make a sustainable impact with a company, with an organization, or within a society. So that we not only preach what we preach here, a couple of facts about our goals from IBM as a company. So we have the big goal in front of us to achieve net zero GHG emissions by 2030. We're on our way, around, I'm not aware of the current figure, but approaching 65% within the next couple of years, and then having the rest to do, the rest to go for the rest of the decade. There are quite a few statistics that we're proud of, like for instance, having 99% of our products being recycled, or with our mainframes and huge data centers being able to achieve 20 to 30% of energy savings year by year. And with every new product generation, this gets even better. So these are things that we work on every day, and not only ourselves, but also with a strong ecosystem of partners. Here you can see a couple of universities, a couple of business organizations, a couple of public organizations where we work closely in our daily business, but also as a company together. Where we are located in the market, just for your information. So when we talk about sustainability business, sustainability as a business unit, it's a huge market, you may know already, and a lot of companies in the consulting space or in the technology space are positioning themselves in the market. We are very proud that from a global perspective, we are among the top 3 companies being recognized. And this is, for us, the signal that we are on the right way to work with our clients and to leverage our technologies, especially AI technologies, for our clients in the topic of sustainability. So now coming to the technologies and the topics, where do we see ourselves? So we say we positioned as a sustainable technologist, a sustainability technologist. That means we focus on our technologies that we have in place, like artificial intelligence, like hybrid cloud, like Internet of Things, where I originally come from. And we leverage these technologies now for projects of sustainability. This means, for instance, in the AI environment, creating learning algorithms for better environmental models, improving and refining responses to environmental problems. For the topic of advanced analytics, where we, like from a company perspective, split these huge fields, saying being capable of working with huge volumes of data, and not only being capable, but also making use of it, understanding these data in time, and to one hand from an energy perspective or sustainability perspective, but also from a business perspective, leveraging these technologies that it makes sense to use them. And finally, bringing this back.
Short moment, we cannot see your screen, but it's not your fault. Like we're trying to fix that in streaming, but you can continue. Just that you're aware that the participants at the moment cannot see your presentation.
Thanks for the hint. Let me know when you can see it. In the meantime, I can tell you what is on the screen here right now. So I'm listing like our 6 major technology areas: artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, 5G or mobile technologies, hybrid multi-cloud, internet, and blockchain. And these are the technologies that most often come into play when we work on sustainability projects, but also on other projects as well, because these are huge fields in the technology space. Basically, when we talk about sustainability projects, we make use of artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, and Internet of Things, of course, obviously, but also hybrid multi-cloud environments, because nowadays, as you may know from your work, there are no projects not running on the cloud, and any client is focusing on moving to the cloud, and therefore also bringing new solutions and new applications to the cloud environments. How do we offer these technologies in the context of sustainability? I've now switched to the next slide, where you can see from a technical side, where you could see later on our 5 major offerings, or put it another way, focus areas in terms of sustainability. So on the one hand, it's everything related to supply chain and circularity, sustainable supply chain and circularity. Here we help companies really making their supply chain transparent, matching to legal regulations that are already there or coming up in the next years, so that they can fulfill their requirements, but also to have like new businesses based on circularity, business ideas, or to have a better control about their supply chain. When you think about current situations in the world, especially now in the Ukraine, where horrible things happen, and the entire world is feeling this impact, not only from a human perspective, also our entire supply chains, our global economy is being interrupted by these kind of events, and companies looking for ways to getting more control and more transparency, how to flexibly react on that kind of events. The second part is basically everything which is related to planning, analytics, and reporting. This is also a huge field, also coming into play, the topic of data management, sustainable data management. So many companies face the situation that they don't have the data, or they don't have access to the data that they need to fulfill the reporting requirements, or to even have more data for themselves. And this is where a lot of current projects are situated. Then we have everything around responsible computing. Green IT is also a very important topic, because even now when we build solutions for clients, we need to build them in a sustainable manner. Build solutions that are heavy on energy consumption, and sell them as sustainability solutions for clients. This doesn't work out, and this is not on our agenda or on the agenda of the market anyway. Then we have decarbonization and clean energy transition, also a very topic when you think of current energy crisis. People need to have flexibility in terms of energy management, and at the end of the day, the entire move to renewable energies. This is related to that area. And finally, also a very urgent and heavy topic area is everything about nature, climate risk assessments and adaptations. So being able to understand and even preview or was looking for the word, forecast any kind of heavy weather impacts, and being able to adapt in time for these events that are potentially going to happen. And around these areas, I now want to close the theoretical part. This is like where we apply technologies like AI. Now I brought you a couple of examples to make it more feasible and to give you more better understanding what we do. Here is such a like an extract from the recent on a global scale. So there are projects like the Plastic Bank, where we build a platform to encourage people collecting plastic instead of letting it go to the oceans, for instance, and then giving them some kind of benefits as a reward for it. Excuse me. But also projects like Coca-Cola, where we make the transparent supply chain to avoid modern slavery. Sorry for that. This is also a kind of topic here. Deep dive into 4 projects.
This is maybe the Oktoberfest virus that you also caught, like many others.
Potentially. I'm not in quarantine.
If you want to get a glass of water, like, feel free, right? Like, we don't want to put our speakers, like chain them to the chair they are sitting on. So have your time.
Thanks. I have my water already here. I already use a Ricola as well. So
let's see if
it's not only
if the quiz can help.
It's not only Oktoberfest virus. Kids in kindergarten and school, you always get a fresh dose of viruses at your place, and you need to cope with that. But anyway, I brought you 4 examples from my team where we especially had our hands on, and to give you a better idea how to apply AI and the entire context of data in the topic of sustainability. So first of all, I talk about a chemical company, a global leader in specialty, and here it's about building a greenhouse gas emission transparency solution. So they really want to understand their emissions and the data around their emissions across their value chain. And the big problem is they don't have accurate data for that. And they're even further, they have no experience with that. So there are no methodologies, there are no common ways, understanding of how to calculate and allocate the data that they potentially need to have and do not have. So they ask us to work with them on building up this solution. And this is really groundwork. This comes along also in other contexts. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a sustainability challenge here. But in the sustainability context, this challenge is even more challenging because many companies do not know how to access this kind of data and do not yet know how to calculate and allocate this data. And to be honest, also the service partners, our companies, my company, other companies in this market, we have experiences in that, but we also do not know every answer on allocation and calculation of this data. We also have to find our ways to make sense of these data. And this is the big challenge, and this is why you get back to the groundwork, where I use this is the type of work that doesn't make so much fun, because you have to sources, you have to get access to the data sources, enrich the data, and then finally apply these to certain use cases. The fun, normally when you start building the models and start training the models, this is around the use cases where you can see some results and things like that. But all the other things need to happen before in order like a productive and scalable solution for a company, instead of a prototype or a pilot that you can just use in a certain very limited context. And this is where the new part comes into play with sustainability, because, as I just said, having access to specific kind of data along the own production line or the own supply chain, and then even have access to this kind of data supply chain, this is new, and this is even difficult to get to build up, and then making use of these new set of data with new technologies like federated learning, new approaches to make sense of these data in order to get them ready for the use cases. This is the mostly long-lasting way to make or to build a foundation for that to finally run their reports or run their models on that data to make sense regarding the use cases. This is another visualization which we did with this client, for instance, and just to give you an idea what happens in this kind of projects. Saying from the very side, identifying the data sources in the own assemblies, in the own factories, in the raw materials, in the logistics, in the distribution, and bringing this up, connecting this in a sustainable way, so-called, so in a efficient way, especially, and covering the entire integration part with different formats, different sources, different technologies behind this, bringing this together to make sense out of it in a kind of storage which is efficient, which runs, when you think of green IT, responsible computing, which also runs in a sustainable manner. And then finally you come to the part where you start calculating, where you start allocating the data, and where you, as I said before, we also start trying to find out which way of calculation makes the most sense to get close to either your requirements, to your regulations in terms of reporting, or in terms of requirements from your use cases, when you finally get into the situation to let your models run on that data. So having that kind of projects where you actually just, when you start that project, you want to start with the reports and the models right away, but having this way to go in order to get there is a critical situation for a project, because the client is not aware of that, or companies are not aware of that all of this is required. Before I said this is also valid for non-sustainable projects, of course. And this has happened in the industry, and in industries and organizations since ages, to making use of their data in an efficient way. The difference is that now with that kind of data, and with the regulations being in place already or coming up from Germany and the EU in the next couple of years, the companies need to have this in place, and not in 10 years' time, next year. Otherwise, they fear heavy fines of not having this data, and that's a way more critical aspect than now investing in these kind of projects. Second example is a platform, now completely changing the topic, away from data management, sustainable supply chains and circularity. The company Oris is a new player on the market, where IBM and the Holcim company founded this company, and building a platform for sustainable management. Here it's about road construction. The platform enables the users to build or make designs and make plans, and finally also execute their projects, build road construction plans in a efficient and sustainable manner, because it takes into account a lot of environmental information about the landscape, about the situation, about the weather, for instance. And that's the very fascinating point, it brings together the local providers of raw materials to the construction companies that are planning these roads. So not that you avoid shifting raw materials because you need some certain kind of material for your construction plan, but making use of those providers that are close to your actually construction planned construction site, and bringing these parties together. Something that was never done before, and in the past always happened or used to on connections based on your list of suppliers that you work with since ages, where you have global contracts, so they deliver also the materials wherever you are in the world. This may make sense when you just work in Germany, in the area of Munich, and build a new highway. So you have your suppliers in the northern part of Germany that can provide you materials. That's fine. But when you build a new highway in Kazakhstan, you may not want to use the northern German provider of materials because they have to ship all the materials over there. They will charge you for these shipments. You may want to use the material providers on site with the same, of course, in case they can provide the same materials for a comparable business case behind that. And at the end of the day, this also makes sense of in a sustainability perspective, because you can work on your carbon emissions using that kind of digital due diligence that the platform provides to you in terms of possibility. So it kind of looks way, as you can see on the left-hand side. So you work a lot with geographical data, and then having algorithms in the background, bringing together after considering a lot of factors and circumstances, bringing together the best fit of material provider and construction project being planned. By the way, it's not an e-commerce platform as it says here, so you still have to do the business by yourself. This was not the ambition of this project, but for a lot of different stakeholders, like road authorities, like engineering, material suppliers, as I talked about, countries, it solves a very massive or very big problem to have the right local information available and to make the best local decisions on your construction project that you can do with this information. And then not only having, as I said before in the past, relationships that you build up with providers, but based on weather data, based on environmental data, based on material data, you can make your decisions on all of that and then project in a most efficient and sustainable manner. Very, very fascinating project, still running. So this is an ongoing project over the next couple of years. And we are very interested to see where this journey goes to. Coming to the next example now, also again another section, another area where we work on. This is energy management, energy transition. That the city of Copenhagen is the first, and as far as I know, so far the only city that gave themselves an own emission target that they want to achieve by 2030, and again that zero emission target, of course. So in order to get there, they needed a new solution, and by coincidence, not only in Germany but also in entire Europe, this solution not only helps them to get to their net zero target, but also helps them to balance the energy consumption of the city itself in total. So when you think of a city and think of the organization of a city, so there are buildings, and city has a lot of like public buildings, there are private buildings, there are the city infrastructure. All these elements consume energy, produce energy, and they can store energy. The challenge here behind this is not only to bring together sustainable energy sources with energy consumers and try to make it in a most. But first of all, to enable these energy consumers again to be sources, and then use this network of different sources and consumers to balance peaks that you have in terms of requirements, energy requirements. Want to be able to have energy anytime, but have this in the most sustainable way, and then at the same time achieving it by 2030. IBM is happy to support the city with something which we call the Flex platform, and come to in a second what this platform is. Here, just again the situations. The buildings in the city make around 40% of energy consumptions, and in these buildings, approximately 33% of this energy is flexible. Here's are some examples like heat, cold storage. All of these things consume energy, but the potential we highlighted here to save and to reuse the energy is huge. And this is where the Flex platform comes into play, sitting in between the energy sources on the right-hand side and the energy consumers on the left-hand side, and making these energy consumers, turning them into storages and turning them into their way of energy providers as well. Potentially, you have energy production in your place or in your family as well, when you have some kind of solar panels on the roofs. Also, models, of course, to already in our markets back to energy into the grid. The big difference here is to have this in an entire closed environment. The city of Copenhagen as a closed grid, where with making use of the Flex platform can balance these amounts of electricity, like make sure to reach have energy when you reach peaks, and if in the other to save energy when you don't need it, or to move it to areas where you need it, and then can use it because there are other areas are saving at the same time. So especially, of course, you can think of IoT technologies to connect all the different assets to the platform. This is obvious. It's built on blockchain technology. You may imagine it's very sensitive, so high requirements in terms of security. And in the very core, the very heart, there are running our AI model to make the forecast and to optimize the flexibility from like 1,000 millions. I don't know how many assets are in there, but it's to balance all of these things. This is the new part that comes along with the Flex platform, and which works very, very well in the city of Copenhagen. You can Google this videos also from Copenhagen, where they show this in combination of their new power plant that they built a couple of years ago. So a very, very interesting project, and very intelligent, making use of AI, very intelligent and very, very sustainable manner here. Okay, and finally, one last example, and then I think we are also slowly approaching the end of our time, unfortunately.
Again, Philip, so don't worry.
Oh,
yeah,
fine, good.
We're gonna continue.
This sounds threatening. A complete different scenario again. In our context, also a sustainability topic. Here it's about avoiding inequalities and strengthening our organizations that we have in at least in our democratic states. This is a project in the public space project where we work for a ministry. I'm not allowed to say which one, but at the end of the day, you may come up of. So it's about validating the legal correctness of documents, or the correctness of legal documents. that used to be like a manual process, taking its time, several hours. You may have been to a public office and needed some documents, and you may have an idea how long this may take. This AI that we built here is enabling this process to be run or to be processed seconds or minutes at least. So we do a document detection and do a document validation based on the visual technologies, and then at the bottom you see one example where there are slight differences in the stems of the country where the people come from. Here's one example from Baghdad, and also the signatures, for instance. So these things can be determined by the AI and can then again in the fraud detection being brought up to the authorities. They can then, based on that information, decide on how to like process and accept these documents, or even the other way around to reject the applications that come with these documents along. A lot of technologies, interesting technologies in the AI context, having been used, especially in terms of explainability. This is something that we are on and try to make this more public, to make AI not the black box no one understands, but to design, develop, and implement explainable AI. And we even achieved a technical award for that here. So this is not just for the sake of having explainable AI. This is for lowering the technologies, and people not like you, but people not being in technologies every day, but they will be in a couple of years or whatever. And with that kind of example, they're already in their business process. They will get in contact with. They need to understand how the technologies work, whether they're trustable, and how they fit to their own specific way of working, and whether it's a threat or whether it's a support for their way of working. So all this comes into play when you get into touch with these new technologies. So in our understanding, we solution to improve the process, but we also built like the documentation that comes along to make it really understandable for the users what is happening with the AI. Okay, so what to take with you? Just a couple of last sentences here. IBM is on its own. We have our own ambitions here that we follow. We have a quite complex portfolio, I would say, quite comprehending on a lot of things. For instance, my team in Munich, we mainly focus on the topics of circularity and sustainability data management. You cannot do everything, of course, so those areas, but as I said with the examples, we also are in contact with or involved projects. And the benefit from IBM is that IBM is huge, and you find a lot of very smart people working on these technologies and applying these technologies in sustainability projects. And this helps, again, to improve your own way of working and to expand your own horizon on this topic. Clients in the industry, in the public space, in the energy areas, with that kind of projects where I talked a lot about. And we're also doing a lot of thought leadership. You may know that IBM has its own research unit, IBM Research. We spend a lot of energy and brain energy and efforts into how to make even more use of technologies to like apply AI in a most efficient way. For instance, neuromorphic computing is a very new topic where we work on. And we, of course, work with a huge ecosystem in order to get these things done, because sustainability is not a topic that, and it's not supposed to be just being delivered by one company or having a solution from one company. At the end of the day, when we all want to save our climate or turn this trend into another direction, we need to work together. And this is one of the areas where I think in the market together to get the best solutions for all of us out of it. If you like what you have seen so far, you can visit our pages. We have a big area about sustainability for business value. This is our market research area. You can have a look here. Of course, also everything around our artificial intelligence process and projects that we work on. And I invite you, if you're interested, to learn more about IBM and how it's working there. Feel free to reach out to our HR pages as well. And then hopefully we see each other again. So Sebastian, back to you. I close my
Well, thank you very much
screen.
For this
presentation,
Philip. I think for me, the key takeaway is that AI in the area of sustainability helps to manage volatility and complexity, may it be with energy consumption, but also with a large amount of different local providers, may it be for a material or construction site. I think, I hope one can see my screen at the moment. Let's see, but at the moment I assume so. All right, so it's time for the Q&A and also for our participants online on Slack. I'm very much looking forward to your questions. I'm very happy that Lucas is there, and he already has a question. So does the Flex platform take in mind small villages in rural zones? For instance, the lack of connectivity could be a problem.
In this current example that I showed you, it does not, because this is exclusively focused on the city of Copenhagen, where you have to have this closed grid that I talked about. The product itself, or the solution itself, it can take into account area. We're talking with private companies about that. We're talking with other cities about that, and you can also, of course, include smaller villages or set this up in rural areas. But of course, as you said with your question itself, you need to have to be able to build this grid. If you don't have, if you cannot be connected to the grid, obviously it doesn't make sense, or it's not possible to have you as a participant in the grid. But that's not a 1-0 decision. Normally you start building this up, and then you at the same time you start rolling this out and bringing piece by piece to the solution. And if the decision is made to include also rural areas, smaller villages, of course, then the project has the Aufgabe, the task to find ways to connect these areas as well.
I had a similar question concerning the ORIS platform, because you were talking basically about a new highway in Kazakhstan. And forgive my lack of cultural knowledge, I don't know what languages they speak in Kazakhstan, maybe Russian, but how do you basically get the supplier information or the data about material providers in Kazakhstan into your platform, although they might not be also not in a supplier data network like here in Europe?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that also refers to the very first example that I was telling you. They need to become like part of the platform, of course. So they need to register, apply, whatever, and enter their data to the platform in the way the platform like requires the information. But this is easier said than done, of course. And this is also like the challenge you have with any kind of platform that you want to bring to the market. You either have such a strong pull effect that people are willing to do so and willing to enter their data or connect their systems and adjust their kind of informations, or you need to help them. You need to bring them in by things are happening here. So for the local businesses, for instance, in Kazakhstan, it's a huge chance to get recognized, to get seen by global companies, by global for global projects. So there is a natural motivation to join this platform to become part of the business. But also, this is just one part of the answer. The second part is within the teams of these projects, there are kind of think of how they called the client engagement managers or something like that, or client engagement consultants or something. So taking the potential participants virtually at hand and them get on the platform, transforming their data, entering the data, whatever it takes, maybe connecting them via certain APIs. And this is to really help people getting on the platform and making use of these technologies and applying this in their workflows, because they may not be able to do this by themselves.
Like if about our participants and our teams working now, I think 48 hours on such a topic, they don't have an engagement manager, right? So do you have any advice, for example, for collecting data, or do you have any databases that you would recommend in the field of sustainability for AI, maybe in construction for circular economy, for also carbon emissions, for calculating a footprint or anything that would basically be a good start?
So in terms of sustainability data, I can recommend you to have a look at the public sources. With public sources, I mean like the governmental organizations, the EU organizations. There are a lot of data available. There are a lot of research in the background that you can find via these organizations, and coming with these research projects or these research organizations, you can also get access to parts of the data as well. That's where I would start looking, and I made good experiences with finding some sources over these ways. I'm not aware of like any private sources that you can use for that purposes. I'm pretty sure, like when you look in your organization in the university context, in the research context, you find as well a couple of valuable sources that you can use.
All right, thank you for those tips. Maybe a very big umbrella question. I mean, for now, we were talking about solutions about AI, how to prevent climate change actually happening, right? Like how to reduce our environmental impact. how do you think will climate change actually affect or contribute to the use of AI? Do you think like it will increase or will it decrease? Like what's your, where, in which areas do you think there's the biggest potential?
You mean climate change will increase the usage
like
of AI?
This would be my
technologies?
hypothesis at the moment, because I don't know, like the weather it becomes much more volatile, influences supply chains, might increase complexity about different risks. I mean, like if we look at the weather, like it's becoming that high that, for example, or the temperature becomes that high, and with so less water in the Rhine that we cannot, like we are not able to deliver raw oil or diesel or fuel to our gas stations, right? And like, I mean, like this has influence along the whole supply chain of for our energy grid, and so much more on logistics, about the prices and so on. So I was wondering, like, where do you see like a field where it would be really valuable to look into as a team or a startup? Like something that has not been solved yet.
Okay, a big question, big umbrella. Let me try to get this in smaller chunks. Anyway, absolutely, or in general, I would absolutely follow your theory. So when you look at in the technical world, a couple of years ago, everything was around cloud technologies. And why was it? Because people needed to have flexible IT infrastructures. Now, mainly flexible IT infrastructures. They're still on their ways, but this is through. So the next big remaining, or even the remaining big topic now on terms of technologies is how to make use of the data that we have. We have a lot of data, and we generate even more data. This could not be solved over the last couple of decades. Awareness of the people, but now it is, not only in sustainability. So in the future, everything will be with AI or about AI. So every application you build, it will not be successful if you don't apply AI to your applications. If you make more sense of the data that the applications is ordered to process, or if you make automation based on AI more put more into the focus of your application, because otherwise these manual based sequential applications no longer delivering that value that companies need to work in their businesses. So this one part of your questions, everything will be around AI. There's one other thing that when you think of being capable of compute and consume that, you think of new ways of computing. I'm talking about quantum computing, for instance, or neuromorphic computing, which are very fascinating new technologies. And if you want to have a peek into what could come up in the next 10 years, I could recommend to look in these two areas. But based on these ways of computing, you still have, again, your applications, which still, again, will be 100% based on AI technologies. That's my personal belief, but that's also when you look at the strategies of companies. For instance, my company, IBM strategy is focusing on two main topics, which is cloud, and as I said, we're almost through this business, and the next one is AI, and this will stay for the next couple of decades. And coming to the second part of the question, what is triggering that? I think we're all aware that climate change is the biggest topic from a society and economical point of view that we have in our lives, at the current situation. So there are, of course, there will always be business and topics and crisis. Of course, this huge topic of climate change, human-made climate change, and all the consequences that come up with that, and all the ideas how to still avoid these consequences, or at least to lower the impact of the consequences. And these, at the same time, the urgency that comes along with that. So this is nothing that we can spend the next 50 years on finding it out slowly. So all these coming together, this is the main driver of technology investments and technology development. And when you now combine these two answers, I would say definitely sustainability is the main driver of AI development, and also the other way around. AI is the best technology, the best tool that we have to make sense of all these trillions, even more. I don't know. The figures are so big. Amounts of weather data, environmental data, business data. Yeah, you know the statistics as well.
Okay. Look where the data is that is available and you can use, and then look for the biggest urgency or the biggest pain point and develop a solution for it to fight climate change. And this is maybe also like a nice closing word. Yeah.
That would be great.
Thank you very much, Philip, for joining us today from IBM. It was a pleasure listening to your talk.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, I hope we see you also in our next events, in our closing ceremony at the end, because this is where the next, the real shit is also then happening. Especially tomorrow, we will have a talk from River AI, as well as from AI for medicine. So we go in a bit of a different field. And we will also have the Partners Lounge, a very interesting event. If you want to get in touch with our sponsors, may it be Microsoft, may it be IBM, and so on, and to see what they are doing, maybe also find a job as a working student, find your topic for a master thesis, for a bachelor thesis. So this is really something I can highly recommend. Then on the 30th, we have the Makeathon kickoff show at 10 a.m. And this is also where the making phase for 48 hours starts. Don't forget to submission your solution then at 11 a.m. the latest. And then we will go on with the jury and also the finals and closing ceremony on the 2nd of October. And maybe take a screenshot, but we will also post all this information again in our Slack channels. I want to thank you very much for listening in today to us with Jasmine as well as with Philip. And don't forget, connect, learn, and collaborate. And see you soon.